You're listening to WCOM LP 103.5 FM Carborough and Chapel Hill. It's a Tuesday, it's 5 o'clock, and that only means one thing. It's time for another round of Snarky Faith with your host, Stuart Deloney. This is a space where we irreverently wrestle through life, culture, and spirituality, all with our heads in the clouds, our tongues in our cheeks, our hearts in our sleeves, and our feet on the ground. At Snarky Faith, the questions or even the answers are never the point. It's all about the conversation. So here's your host, Stuart Deloney.
Well, good afternoon, if you can call it that. But I can tell you for certain, welcome to another round of Snarky Faith Radio. And we begin to talk about good, which is how I usually begin my shows, speaking about what I think is good. As I greet you, being able to say good afternoon. We're in a weird realm where I can give you that salutation, though I'm not quite sure I mean that salutation. How about if I were to say, effed up afternoon, how are you? That may be better, a better way to be able to articulate that, because another week, another shooting, this time in New Zealand, in Christchurch, New Zealand, where two different mosques were shut up by a deranged white supremacist shooter, gunman, crazy person, hateful bigot. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how to label folks anymore in these situations. And the sad fact of the matter is that these situations are all too common. These situations that we're seeing, they seem to be happening on a regular basis, whether it's inside America, which I easily like to rage about the fact that it oftentimes feels like another week, another school shooting in America. But also, now that we begin to see our brothers and sisters across the globe, we're able to see, another week, another hate crime. This time with at least 50 people dead and more injured from this. And instances like this are things that I begin to, I don't know, I begin to kind of question what the hell is up with the world at large. And in situations like this, I begin to see just the way the media responds. I begin to see the way the churches respond. And I begin just to question myself that it almost feels like we're just going through the motions again. It feels like we kind of have our like Mad Libs version of a PR response to another tragedy, and we just fill in the blanks with different names and different dates. And we mourn for as long as social media tells us to mourn for, and then we move on to the next story or the next outrage in the news cycle that occupies our mind. And I don't want to move on from this. I don't. And I don't want to move on from this for a few reasons. And it's just fair warning right now as I look at the clock right now. So you are you're less than 4 minutes into the show. So this is the moment where you should feel free to bail. I'm giving you free license to get up and leave. No one will judge you. I won't even judge you. I'm just going ahead and tell you right now, whether you're listening to this via podcast or via terrestrial radio, I'm giving you the opportunity to turn it off right now. Because this show, I mean, many times we kind of go like light stream of consciousness, kind of moving from topic to topic or what is on the top of Stuart's head. But this one's going to be a little bit heavier on that. Will we have the Christian crazy today? We will. But I'll kind of weave it in intermittently throughout the conversation that we're going to be having. And I wanted to have a conversation about something, or at least somewhere in the realm of thinking about how we mourn and what we do afterwards. Because I think in America especially, but I think that we do this just in the human race very well. Mourning and being sad when there is a tragedy or people in our lives are experiencing loss. Those are the times that we feel very uncomfortable. The weird thing about this is that suffering and loss is an inherent part of the human experience. Like we're hardwired to kind of go through these things. Like if you think about it, I mean, like struggle is hardwired into us. Like, when we're a baby, we have to eventually learn to walk, and learning to walk involves pain, involves trial and error. It involves moving from things. It involves leaving certain things behind to be able to move forward to get other things. And so the idea of pain and loss is kind of hardwired within the whole human experience. And so when we have these situations of tragedy that happen, why do we act so weird about them? I mean, we know that we need to do the obligatory like social media posting about how our hearts are broken and how we're sad about this, but it just becomes like an exercise in futility. It becomes kind of like that like thank you note that you send to somebody, but you're doing it mainly as a courtesy, not because like you're actually feeling it deeply. It's a social norm. And I feel like that dealing with situations of tragedy, like the one that happened in Christchurch, I feel like that we know how to act socially to respond to this. We talk about thoughts and prayers. We talk about how horrible it is. We talk about all of this because it ends up really just being a talking point. It isn't like really a fully realized tragedy where we are sad and we feel grief. It's not really a situation where we're able to say, "Wow, this is in my backyard. I really know how these folks feel," even though, dear God, if you live in America in 2019, the idea of tragedies and the idea of shooting and the idea of loss, it shouldn't be something that feels very far away from us. But it does feel like another week, another tragedy. And the reason I really wanted to dissect this one was really for us to kind of have a time to really contemplate how we hold on to things like grief, like outrage, or even just really just deep, deep, deep sadness. And I'd mentioned earlier that so for those of you, again, we're now at the 8-minute mark. I'm not I swear to God I will not I'm not gonna remind you like time codes moving through this, but I will remind you that around the 4-minute mark, I did tell you could leave. Um, but if you're still here, you're my favorite. I'll just go ahead and say this. It's like you're my favorite children right now. The ones I told could leave earlier, whatever. They're still my kids, but come on. You guys, you're my kids. You're my favorite ones. Come on, that hung around here. Because I've been before even this happened, it's been something that I've really been processing through my heart and my soul about this idea of of tragedy and grief and progress. Because many times when we begin to look at this on like a smaller scale, it feels like when we have instances like this, when we have shootings, we have massacres happening, it just feels like humanity is not progressing. It feels like humanity is not moving forward. It feels like humanity continues just to default back into those easy rhythms of. I mean, I honestly, I feel like these are easy rhythms that probably brought us back to how we were in the like, like the caveman stages of life. Um, Anger. Me no like anger. Me want to go inflict pain on people that me no like. I feel like we move backwards, and especially when we talk about issues of hate and bigotry and misogyny, and especially when it comes to this intolerance and hate. I just keep telling myself in my head, and it's this weird like question I have over and over again, and I just keep saying like that. Wait, I'll be like, we're in 2019, Stuart, because again, this is an inner monologue I'm having here. So if you had an inner monologue that involved talking to someone named Stuart, that would probably be weird unless your name happens to be Stuart. But since there's very few of us in the population, if that is happening to you, you may need to seek treatment. I'm joking. This is a show called Snarky Faith, so just bear with me. But I'll have these conversations of just saying like that we're living in 2019 right now. Why is this still a thing? Why is this still a problem? Why does this still exist? And we do this often on the show because when I look at the state of the world and progress, and especially the state of where Christianity is and exists, I continue to ask myself a very similar question of why is this still happening? Why are we still here? Why are we not moving forward? Why are we not becoming better? Why do we continue just to default back to our worst impulses and yeah, why do we do this? Um, because in many ways, I don't know, in many ways it feels like we're not really progressing beyond like our high school selves. You know, those weird insecurities, those weird categories that we found ourselves living in, where we're either the in this crowd or this crowd, or we're part of this group or this group, that we kind of just we self-identify in the similar way that we did when we were in our teenage years. You know, those teenage years that we couldn't get rid of quick enough. But psychologically speaking, it feels like we're very much still there as a human race. It feels like our insecurities are just as raw. Our stupidity is just there waiting below the surface. And it feels like we're not getting better. And the sad thing is it takes mass tragedy to bring me to the point of really being able to question stuff again. Um well, that's not entirely true. I feel like I'm a person that um apparently in life just enjoys pain because I'm always questioning things. I'm always questioning what I'm doing, where I'm at, why am I here, why does this happen, why is this continuing? You know, I do this because apparently I like pain. Um, but when I begin to think, I don't know, I just keep returning to this question as like, how have we not moved beyond this? How have we not progressed forward? You know, why are we still like caught in the Paula Abdul paradox of like two steps forward and two steps back, where humanity just seems to just levitate in the same state of just being simple and stupid and teenage angsty. Like if I wanted to remain in this stage of being a moron, but assuming I knew what was going on, I could watch Riverdale on a basis, on a regular basis. And I've made it through season 1, FYI, because I have teenage kids. But I would hope for us, just as a human species, that we would begin to move forward and progress and make better decisions. Or I would assume, just uh, even as people of faith, that we would again continue to progress and to move forward and not to fall into the same traps. And but we don't. And it leaves me to these places where I end up feeling very. I just feel like this overwhelming kind of just melancholy. If we're gonna go Smashing Pumpkins, melancholy and infinite sadness. It really feels like that is happening because I know that we can do better. And for people that know me like on a deeper level, I've heard this spoken about me. How on one level I'm a very hopeful person, but on one level I'm a very cynical person. And this has been an observation, I guess what I'm trying to say, that's been made by multiple people at different places in my life and different situations. And I feel like being able to walk that weird tightrope of being a person that sees potential and sees hope and sees greatness, but at the same time sees a very, very dark, cold, stark reality of where we're at. Um, it makes me, in many ways, feel very mentally bipolar, to where I can be like, man, I have the most hope for where we're moving as humanity, as a people, or as faith, but then at the same time have absolutely no hope in people because we default towards being stupid and petty and small and selfish. And the sad thing is, the church in America looks just the same way. It's just as selfish, just as inward. And the sad thing is, that's not going to change anytime soon, even though it should change and be changing. That won't happen because there's too much money involved, and we don't want to do the right thing if it's going to cost anything of us, right? Right? Yeah, that's the history of Christianity. There's the right thing to do, and there's the thing that we don't want to do because it requires self-sacrifice. Because doing the right thing would seem too much like Jesus, and it would cost something of us. No, 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 we cannot do that. We need to do the safe thing. So yeah, this is what you're getting today. And then I begin to again continue. Then I hear about these shootings, and uh, in Christchurch, which is just it's just beyond disgusting. It's beyond horrific, and frankly, I just feel like that we're at a place in a society as humans in America that I'm really just at a point of, how does this still happen? I mean, I have hope in the fact that I hear New Zealand responding and saying, we're going to deal with guns. We're going to deal with this in a very quick and expedited manner. So when I hear stuff like that, I feel hopeful. Now, when I hear Christians online being able to use these attacks as a platform to begin to post old stories of where Christians are persecuted online, where they need to remind us of, well, Christians are being persecuted too, where there's no space for mourning. There's no space for us to be able to say this is wrong. And we live in America where we have a president who, for the life of him, cannot call out white supremacy, who cannot call out the Nazis, and couldn't, which is such a ridiculous statement in 2019 that we would even be saying this. An American president would have an issue calling out white supremacy, Nazis, and hate groups like that. Like, to me, I'm just at a point, like, we should hopefully be at a point in our evolutionary process where, yeah, like that's an easy one, and that should be the easiest that should be the easiest response for a world leader. Just wholeheartedly condemn the acts of violence. But oh no, we've got America saying, hold my beer. We can do better. We can just make this situation so effing worse. And I bring up all of this, and I know we're having like this big mishmash of topics, but I do promise you we're kind of moving towards something. But again, I remind you, this is a president who somehow cannot bring himself to utter those words, that this is wrong. I mean, it's almost cartoonish that he just can't. It's either like cartoonish or like a bad sitcom. You know, you've seen those ones in the past where like they have someone that like he needs to say "I love you" and he's like "Hello, I love, I love." You know, those kind of sitcoms that are just terrible. where you're like, no human acts like that. Ah, I was wrong. We've got a president that cannot say these things, but he can't say them because he doesn't want to say them. And again, this is a president that conservatives and evangelicals have hailed as their new Messiah. They've hailed as a man that God put in power. And what I scratch my head at is that any person that would say that they have anything to do with Jesus would be able to say, this guy, this orange bastard, he's my man. He's God's man. We love him. And this man that somehow can talk about how sad he is and about how, oh no, how poorly he's treated by things like effing Saturday Night Live. But he can't call out emphatically these situations of disgusting hate. On the same day, the president was egging on the fact that he's really excited now that one of his talking points is somehow that the Democrats are anti-Jewish because, of course, a bigoted president is wanting to find someone else to be able to point out the fact that someone else is doing what I do. Like, it really, if you like, you can boil down most of what the president does to her, and he's calling out someone else. He's always really kind of calling out himself when he's saying, oh, look at this person. This person's a liar. Well, of course, he's a liar. And even one of the dumbest things that I've even seen recently that I didn't get to talk about anywhere else, but I think proves this point very well. Something really dumb, especially before the massacre had happened, was were online were people talking about the fact that they're assuming that Melania has a body double. And yes, it's stupid. It's so dumb. But I will tell you, once President Trump began to tweet about the fact that it's horrible that people are talking about Melania having a double, like a fake person that shows up at events just to hold hands with Trump. As soon as Trump began to say this is outrageous and ridiculous, just knowing the fact that he like lies for breakfast, he lies for lunch, he lies for dinner, like that's just part of his nature. Like, most people breathe, Trump just lies. And once he said that, that this is a total hoax, this is wrong, I was like, oh my God, this is true. That's just the way my brain went. Before this point, yes, this is dumb. It's funny stuff to talk about, conspiracy theory and otherwise. But once he actually like comes out and says like, no, there's no way this is happening, I was like, holy crap, this is absolutely true. At least it's got like it's got the chance of a coin flip to be true. So we have that president that is wholeheartedly embraced by evangelicals and conservatives, that has actually pastors that surround him that are part of a faith council that prays for him, that advises him. Yeah, that guy. The president that somehow can't denounce acts of violence and hate, and he can't denounce like bigotry and white supremacy. Like that, again, easiest answer in the book. True, false. Is white supremacy wrong? All the above. I mean, I feel like I'm getting caught in this thing with him. You're like, no, you dumb idiot. Like, no, it's wrong. It's wrong. But this man is supported by people like this. And so we're doing, again, yeah, you're going to get your Christian crazy. It's just a little it's just a little out of order. But here you go with our less enthusiastic version of Christian Crazy of the Week. So here's Bill Mitchell, Christian radio host, giving you why Trump acts the way Trump does. So, of course, you didn't know this, but now you do. So here you go.
I think Donald Trump is so strategic that it's beyond just his ability as a human to think this way. I think he is literally being guided by the hand of God. And of course, God knows how this movie ends. Guided by the hand of God to make the right moves at the right time. And they seem like they don't make sense. They seem like they can't possibly work out. And yet at the end, when the clock hits zero, when the final gun sounds, we are in the winner's circle over and over and over again. And even when we lost the house, it's turning out to be a win for us. All things work together for the good to those that love the Lord and to those who love America, God's country. It's all working out.
And if I keep telling myself I'm good enough, smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me, if I say it enough times, it'll be true. Just because we say something with vigorous frequency does not make it true. Just because we claim that God is behind something does not make it true. Just because Donald Trump seems like a narcissistic dumbass does not mean that somehow God's wild, God's crazy. He's like a fox. You know, when you expect God to zig, he zags. And that's why we got Trump. Yeah. You're going to see people. Yeah, you're going to see it. You're going to see where he goes. Woohoo. Look at it. God's on the move. No, Bill Mitchell, shut the hell up, you dumbass. What is this? Like, when we begin to hear this, and again, we've talked about this endlessly on the show, but this is like a dumb gaslighting technique where you're continuing to tell people just because of what you see and what you hear, that's not exactly what's happening, right? Just because this man seems just like a bigoted, misogynistic failure of a lump of flesh, whatever he is, that Trump is, you know? Just realize God's in charge. And just realize God is using this blobfish to do great things. You don't see it, but God's ways aren't our ways, people. God's ways aren't our... Yeah, I've heard this BS 1,000 times. That is just simply used over and over to try to trick people into recognizing that whoever the speaker is, it's right. And it doesn't make any sense. Yes, Republicans losing in the midterms. Oh, it's God's crafty plan. Look at God move. He makes us feel like the other side is winning, but at the same time, we're winning. No, people. No. And see, this gets me about like a faith in Christianity. When we hear this kind of stuff, you're just kind of like, wait, what? Like, what? Oh, all of this, just God's ways aren't our ways. So just because none of this makes sense, because all of this seems horrible and bad, just don't worry. Because God's in charge. Yeah, God's in charge. And if you don't believe God's in charge, well there, Mr. or Mrs., you need to listen to Christian leader Brian Fisher from the American Family Association. Because he's going to tell you a thing or two about how we need to look at this massacre that happened in New Zealand. Because again, Brian's going to tell you he hates Islam, but he doesn't hate Muslims. Because he does a really good job being... Yeah, I don't even know what the hell that even means. But go ahead and listen to Brian and we'll just make fun of the crazy stuff he says. Keeping in mind that this is a Christian leader that has a platform. Yeah, go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
I hate Islam.
He says, asking a question that no one asked.
And I hate Islam. I don't hate Muslims. I hate Islam because it is a danger to everything that's important to me.
It is important to remember that in the United States of America, when a white man, especially an older white man of privilege, feels threatened, he needs to be able to talk about the things that mean something to him and why something else is damaging the things that mean something to him. So just remember, people, Brian is hurting here because there's things that mean something to him. Don't you know they mean something to him? They do. A lot. They really do. Brian has a lot of things that mean something to him. They mean something to him.
My faith, my country, my liberty, Christianity, civil rights.
Civil rights. Oh, civil rights for white Christians. Yeah, that's right. All right, continue.
Everything that you and I treasure is threatened by Islam. Now, what this guy did in New Zealand, that's not how you go about solving that problem. That's not what you do.
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, Brian Fisher, what did you just say? That's not the right way to deal with this problem that we have with these people? What? Like what? Like again, remember I went back to earlier in the show. Hey, old white Christians that are conservative, evangelical, whatever, you guys, like seriously. You easiest PR, whether you believe it or not. I would hope that you believe it, but since you most probably don't, the best PR way of handling this is just denounce it. Don't go ahead and say, well, the dude may have had a point, but he went about it the wrong way. Yeah. Because that's kind of, what I want to say. Absolutely sick. Really? Yeah? Yeah. Brian Fisher's sick. But go ahead, Brian. Continue on. Dig yourself a deeper grave.
This is the wrong way to go about it. But he is correct only in that Islam is something that does need to be stopped. I say we stop it by...
Dude, you're just done. You're done. You're done. You're done. You're done. You're done. You went down the wrong trail. You're done. You're done, buddy. Nothing else to say. Does he get himself out of it? Just go ahead and guess. Anyone? Any wagers? No, he doesn't? All right. Go ahead, Brian. Just go ahead.
Suspending Islamic immigration, as the president did. We can extend his ban. Remember, that was upheld by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, yes, the president can suspend Islamic immigration for the sake of our security. That's something I think we need to do. And part of why you have situations like this happen, and again, I'm not making excuses.
Yeah, but you are. You are making excuses like this. You are making excuses for bigotry and racism. And being able to somehow saying a situation like what happened in New Zealand was caused by immigration. So for folks that moved there, they were the problem. Now, I know ultimately you're not like heralding this sick son of a bitch that went and shot a bunch of people, but think of the language that you're using, bri. Because you're somehow agreeing with the president and putting the fact that our countries would be safer if we had better immigration. So then those that have, mass shooting tendencies won't need to follow out on their desires. Now, where have I heard something like this before? Oh, I've heard it from other conservative Christians. Think about this. Okay, I'm going on a slight tangent here, but you're going to see where I'm getting at. So we have folks like Mike Pence, Vice President of the United States. Mike Pence, who is just a conservative beyond conservative, a homophobic beyond homophobia. He's that guy. He's the guy that follows the Billy Graham rule. We've talked about on the show endlessly. But the Billy Graham rule essentially means this. It means that men, good Christian, upstanding men, cannot ever be alone with a woman. Why? Because the subtext to the whole Billy Graham rule is that men somehow can't control themselves and women are the wily part of the species. And they're so tempting based upon what they do and their temptingness. Because, they've got boobs and stuff. I don't know how this whole Billy Graham rule came about, but it's this idea that somehow men should not be tempted and women are the problem, right? Do you see kind of how we're scapegoating in these situations? Especially during the Me Too movement, we're seeing all this that are happening in churches and everything else that is happening here that, guess what? No, the predators, they're the problems. The Catholic priests that are touching boys? No. It's not that the boys were too enticing or delicious. No, it's that these people are sick bastards. These men of power that are preying on women and other subordinates, they're the sick ones. Don't blame the subordinates. Blame the person that are perpetrating the problem here. So we again see this with someone like Brian Fisher that's being able to say, well, the problem really here in New Zealand was that if they would have had stronger immigration policy, it would have kept Muslims out to begin with. And if you have no Muslims, you have no reason for a person with shooter tendencies to go and shoot. No, none of this makes sense. I would hope to say from anywhere in the world that people have the ability to be able to just live in a way where they can do no harm and try to make a life about themselves. Now, that was supposed to be one of the beautiful things about America. This idea that people could come and make something for themselves, that like hard work could help them move up and better their lives. But again, that's just really a lie, because we all understand that the rich run America and the rest is an illusion. Oh, wow. Yes. So have you been picking up on the fact that Stuart may be in a little bit of a dark place right now? But actually processing through all of this, this, again, is scapegoating. Trump continues to do this, too. It's a horrible thing that happened, done just by a few, like, isolated people. The white nationalism is not an issue. Yes, it is an issue. Why is it an issue? Because as long as people are still getting hurt and killed, as long as people are being pushed down and treated like garbage, white nationalism is a problem. It's not a little problem. It's a problem until it's not a problem. That's how it works. But we have a president that is worshipped by conservative and evangelicals alike. We have a president that's worshipped by them that somehow cannot seem to get that word out of his mouth that this is bad. We have a president that can't condemn bad stuff because, honestly, he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to. And we have Christian leaders and just sick people like Brian Fisher and other Christian leaders that are trying to do like lip service for tragedies like this, but somehow just keep digging the hole deeper and just keep making it worse. We have Christian leaders that continue just to prop up a president that is by all means just mentally and physically, and if you even want to go here, I don't evaluate people in this way, but guess what? The conservatives have heralded and lauded him in this way. I mean, I don't judge my presidents based upon their spirituality, unless a lot of Christianity is voting him in because of his spirituality. A lot of Christianity is making up these weird lines of BS that somehow God is working through this man. No, I'm not going to judge a world leader's spirituality until, wait, what is it? Christianity? You've made this an issue? Oh, okay, so then I'll judge it. Yeah, a person who is beyond morally bankrupt, beyond mentally bankrupt, and spiritually, I don't even just go there. That's just silly. That's just silly. It's sad. And the fact that it continues to fool people is even more sad. You see, here's where I wanted to get to with this, because I could continue down. I have many more responses to our Christian crazy, but I just don't, at this point, I just don't really feel like it's very helpful. One of the problems that we have in situations like this, and a lot of my show has been an assault against Christianity and their inability to mourn, but also I'm not letting the rest of America off the hook in knowing how to mourn. I mean, thankfully, we've moved to the place where thoughts and prayers aren't the default BS answer to situations like this. So we're like, oh, thoughts and prayers, move along. No. And I'll share some of this. I've talked a little bit about this before on the show before. But just even going down to, and we've talked like politically on a larger scale, but I want to talk about just generally about why pastors have a hard time dealing with grief. Not their own grief, because they certainly don't deal with that, but grief of their parishioners. Because when you begin to look at church like some sort of a well-oiled machine, like a program that we are here from this time to this time, this is, it's almost like a television program. Like we have this, we have classes now, we have a service here, a service here, a service here. You show up to volunteer here. We have this whole thing. It's all programmed and nice because, life is always clean and nice and tidy and programmed. But what I've seen, and I was talking to another good friend of mine that has been through a life of working in ministry. I was talking to him earlier today about some of this, and I was asking him, I was like, so is this just me? Is this just me being a cynic and talking about this? And and he was like, no. And he's grown up in a different walk of life than I have, but we have seen our share of atrocities within the church, because if you've been around the church, especially working behind the scenes long enough, you'll see your fair share of atrocities. But ultimately, when you try to make church into some sort of a well-oiled machine where you're turning out a product on a regular basis, the idea of having things that are messy, the idea of having things that aren't clean and nice and tidy, that doesn't fit very well. And what do I mean by that? Well, human tragedy doesn't fit nice and well and tidy. And many of you will probably be hearing on Sundays at church about, oh, we want to send out our thoughts and prayers to these people across the globe. This is a horrible tragedy. Let's all have a time of silence and prayer. When you hear that thing, see, that is sweeping the issue under the rug in a way that seems overly spiritual, but it's a way that's very controlled, and it enables churches to be able to check a box off. Because they had their little moment, they had their little PSA for this tragedy, but then we can go back to business as usual. Because pastors will say that they're praying to God, but it's probably some pre-prepared oratory speech that they're going to just read that sounds spiritual, but really it's for the congregation to sit and go, yes, Jesus, yes, Lord. I feel good now. Thank you, Jesus. Please help them heathens. But what begins to happen within the church is that the idea of messiness and mourning is very messy. Now, I hope you don't ever have to go through a process of mourning, but if you're human and you've lived enough on this earth, you've probably dealt with loss. You've probably dealt with mess. You've probably dealt with heartache and feeling broken. See, all of those things are very messy because they deal with our emotions. They deal with our life. They deal in the icky layers where we may not always say the right thing or act the right way. They don't fit well into a well-oiled machine. So some churches will have groups so they can shuffle you off. We have grief share groups. You go off and hang out with the other sad sacks over in the back corner. If you're part of AA, go over to those other drunkards in the corner. You meet with them. We have a way of being able to kind of just section off and push off the people that we would say, no one will actually say this out loud, but I'm just going to put words to this, that are icky, dirty. We just want the happy people in church on Sunday. We just want the people that worship in the way that we like to worship, because worship needs to look like this and feel like this. Damn it. But most pastors that I've met are uncomfortable with counseling people through grief. They're uncomfortable with being there. And what they begin to do is they develop a bunch of default statements they tell people. And they have developed a posture of how to speak to where people are suffering because it seems good. But the fact of the matter is, mourning is messy. And there's not a timeline for when you get over pain. And sometimes you'll think you're over pain of losing someone, but it comes back and hits you at weird times. Because that's just the way it works with human emotions and the human psyche. I remember, and I'll share just a little bit of my story. When I was 13, my sister died, which is the great segue to begin to a fun story. My sister died, and before she died, we were in the hospital. She had drowned, and they still had her hooked up to machines and on life support. And I remember, because I was around 13 at the time, and I remember just this is a whole longer story to it, but I'd been through a lot of a lot of the trauma leading up to her being in the hospital, and I was around the ambulance and everything else, and all of just the insanity that it was. And as a 13-year-old, hell, if I did it right now as a 40-year-old, I wouldn't really know how to do it. But especially as a 13-year-old, you really don't know how to handle any of this. It's just all just bizarre. And my parents didn't know how to handle me. They didn't know how to talk to me. They didn't know how to really say or do anything because, again, they're dealing with their own mess. And so, really, like, I'm just the weird kid that nobody knows how to talk to because I have adults to come to counsel my parents because adults can kind of talk to other adults. But, when they want to come and talk to me, they don't know what to do. What do you tell, like, a 13-year-old kid? But I remember, like, our pastor coming down and sitting next to me, giving me his pearls and words of wisdom that somehow entailed him talking to me about the time when he had his appendix out and was also in the hospital. Tells me a wonderful anecdote about eating ice cream in the hospital and walking around with a gown that was open in the back, and oh, the fun, oh, the hilarity, because I'm sitting in the waiting room in a hospital and I know my sister's going to die, and somehow all of this makes sense because hospital. But I've seen this happen more and more. And the sad matter of fact is that when people are going through times of grief where nothing makes sense, a Bible verse isn't going to fix it. A nice little pithy statement isn't going to fix it. Prayers and these thoughts and prayers aren't going to fix it. But that's not what being human is about. That's not what community is supposed to be about. Like, part of being able to be with people when they're going through something is to be there. It's not just to kind of show up, check in, do your duty, and move on. Because in these situations, it requires us to sit and deal with our own junk. It requires us to sit in the pain. And it requires us to sit and listen to the questions of those that are suffering. It requires us to sit there and say, how like in situations like in New Zealand, how does this not happen? And kudos to the Prime Minister of New Zealand who has stepped forward and saying this cannot happen again. Because they're a tiny country, and somehow in America, we've had however many mass shootings since the last mass shootings, and we can't figure this crap out. Because mourning costs something of us. Suffering costs something of us. And these are situations that change us. And they scar us. But hopefully it changes us in a way that is able to give us empathy for when other people suffer. And when other tragedies happen. So we can collectively come together and saying, I don't know your exact pain, but I know pain. And I know what you're feeling in some sense. And I'm so sorry this happened. And if you feel outrage, I am outraged too. And we need to figure out how to stop this system. How to make sure this pain ceases. Like, the hypothetical glory of the Bible and the gospel is that things move in a direction towards there being a time where there is less suffering. But I think Christianity has forgotten that. Christianity's become all about, like, I want my way. I want to worship in my way. I want to worship my way. I don't like I don't know what even it's just become about personal preference and selfishness, and it's just disgusting. Because when we're in times like this, where there is suffering and there is loss and there is tragedy, Christian leaders should just simply say that we will mourn with you. And we want to make sure with you that these tragedies don't continue. This isn't about politics. This is about humanity. Like, damn it, this is about humanity. And somehow we miss it. And so we mourn with those that have lost in New Zealand. We mourn with those that have lost here in the United States from gun violence. We mourn with those who lose abroad when there are other senseless acts of violence. And we mourn because we hope for better days where there will be less violence. where we don't need to see other groups as groups that we fear that we need to eliminate. Whether you're speaking about this physically or spiritually, like a-holes like Brian Fisher. No, we want to move to be better, to be more loving, to be more compassionate, to be able to close the loops of violence so these things don't happen anymore. We do not want our children to continue to suffer like this and other people's children to suffer like this. I may not know the families that are suffering in New Zealand, but I do know what it's like to have people of your family gone. I know it hurts, and I know it hurts them. And I know enough that if there were ways to stop this, we should do this. We should unite around this. And this shouldn't be about politics. It shouldn't be about faith. This should just be about common effing sense. We live in 2019, and I began the show in this way. This stuff should not be continuing to happen. We should not continue to be divided by issues like this. We should be able to see it for what it's worth. We should be able to respond and not worry about what it costs me, whether it be personally or politically. We should just be about doing what's right. And it'd be easy for me to say, because that's something that Jesus would tell you to do. Because Jesus would tell you to be loving and compassionate and to do what's right. But for those that listen to the show that just could give two craps about Christianity or faith, because I feel that way many times, we should do this thing because it is just simply the right thing to do based upon whatever your belief system is. Tragedies like this should stop. And we shouldn't be divided over stuff like this. These should be easy answers. Call out what's evil. Call out what's wrong. And move towards a place where we can fix it. Because otherwise, it's just going to continue to repeat itself. Well, that's all I've got this hour here on the show. Thank you for bearing with me. And I send you out with the holiest amount of grace and snark and peace and the hope that we can make this world a better place. I'm out of here, and I'll catch you again next week.
WCOM is listener-supported community radio, and Snarky Faith is only possible through our sponsors. Lumen, a spiritual community of seekers, sojourners, question-askers, doubters, and skeptics, is a collective of fellow travelers that embrace the truth that all of life is sacred, hope is real, and tomorrow can be a better day than today. All are welcome. You can find more information at www.lumencommunities.com.